I'm going to be making a piece of Italian charcuterie called a coppa, and it's made from the top part of the shoulder. In this country, in the UK, it's called the neck cut. Now, I've got the meat here on the bench, and this is from a wonderful farm shop. Okay, we got this from Hockey's Farm Shop. It's in a place called Fordingbridge in Hampshire. It's not cheap. It's from a lop pig, which is a rare breed in the UK, and this, you can see, is already trimmed. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a cure to this. We're going to pop this into a curing bag, and we are going to cure this. And you can see here, this is the sort of cross-sectional area. It's very difficult to make out, but once this is cured, you get a wonderful sort of rustic salami style sort of cross-sectional area with this, and that's what makes it so wonderful. The shoulder meat on all pigs runs into the neck, and it takes all those muscle groups in there as well, and it becomes this wonderful looking piece of charcuterie. I'll post some pictures of what coppa looks like once it's been cured, so you can see what I mean. It's like almost a rustic kind of salami. So we'll get curing this. First thing I want to do is weigh the meat. Now, I don't need to weigh the meat in this instance because I know this is exactly a kilogram. Well, it's actually 2 grams under a kilo, but for argument's sake, we'll call it a kilo. And let me take you through some of the ingredients. So that's always the first thing you do, is weigh the meat. The ingredients I'm going to be putting with this coppa to cure is some juniper berries. I've got some fennel, and these are tablespoon measures, by the way, and a teaspoon of black pepper, and some garlic. And the actual curing ingredients themselves is salt and Prague powder number 2. Now, because we're using a kilo, Prague powder 2 is used at the rate of 2.5 grams per kilo, so that is 2.5 grams. That's what 2.5 grams looks like. What I would say is, if whenever you're curing with Prague powders or specialist curing salts, always use very accurate means to measure your ingredients. Don't always go on a half teaspoon, which I think some people say a half teaspoon is 2.5 grams. It isn't. It's very difficult to be accurate when you use teaspoons. I would always say get yourself some decent scales and use them to give you the accurate measurements. So these two combined come to 30 grams. So I've got 27.5 grams of salt, pre-weighed for brevity, and 2.5 grams of Prague powder. We do sell Prague powder 2 on our website under the Smoke Dust brand. We do it in 80 gram pouches, we do it in 200 gram pouches, 400 grams, and also kilo if you are into the trade pack and you do lots of curing. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how we're going to cure this, I'm going to cure it in this vacuum bag. The advantages of curing it in a vacuum bag rather than any other vessel is that it keeps all the ingredients really close to the meat and on the meat. And I've seen some people curing in a bowl first and then transferring it into a bag, and obviously you do leave some remnants in the bowl. I'm going to cure directly into the bag so that everything gets straight into the bag. So without further ado, let's crack on. So the first thing I am actually going to do is I'm going to put the meat into the bag. Now you'll see I've actually turned the lip of the bag over, so when we seal this we don't have any meat juice or salt to obstruct that sealing process. That is very important. So first things first, I can put these two together because they're all going in the bag. I'll make sure that I don't leave any of that behind. Okay, so that's our cure. I will just mix that around a little bit, and then we'll get that into the bag in a second. First things first though, I need to crush these ingredients. Just deposit those in the bag like so. I'll also put the pepper in there as well. Okay, that's good. And I'll put the salt and the cure in there as well. That's all in there. The only thing to go in there now is the garlic. I'll do a couple of cloves at a time. Try and keep my knife away from breaking the bag if I can avoid that. That will be a good thing. We'll never get a vacuum if we do that. Okay, so lots of garlic there. I do love this piece of charcuterie. This is one of my favourites. It's a real deli go-to if I see this on the shelf. But as it's so easy to make. Oh, and by the way, once you've crushed your garlic, you can throw all these bits in there as well. So no need to waste any. It's all flavour, and it's all broken up, so we can get that in there as best we can. I am just going to pop a little glove on here, and once I've done that, I'll be able to move all these ingredients around. So we'll just fire this in here. We'll get this meat well and truly covered. Now what will happen is, as this is curing, what you'll find is that the moisture in the meat will be drawn out by the salt, and it will form its own kind of brine. And when it does that, you'll get a nice even coverage. Every day we're going to go into this meat and we're going to turn it. They call it overhauling. And basically all you're doing is you're duffing the meat up and taking out all your frustrations on it. And that will allow for those herbs and spices and also the cure to become really ingrained into that meat. So we're just going to pop this in our vacuum machine. We're going to draw a vacuum. And seal it. Okay, there we are. That is our copper now on cure. The salt will start to draw that moisture out of the meat, and it'll also make it like a little brine in there. So it's almost like its own little brine box in there. So we're going to put here copper, and we know it's at 998 grams, and today's date is the 26th of the 7th. Excellent. So how long do we cure this for? Great question. I'm glad you asked. Generally speaking, with pork, you can cure it for 1 day for every ½ inch of thickness, plus 2 days. So if I was to hold this meat like this, I would see that that's about 3 inches across. And because we're only curing to the middle and we're going to be curing from all sides, we can take 1½ inches, that's 3 lots of ½ an inch, and we can add 2 days to that. So in total, that's 5 days. Now, some people might say, well, that doesn't sound very long. You can cure this because we've used very precise measurements of salt. You can cure this for longer. So between 5 and 7 days is going to be absolutely fine. You're not going to oversalt this. And remember, every day this is in the fridge, you're going to be going back to it, giving it a bit of a tussle like that, and then leaving it back in the fridge. Okay, so here's our copper out the fridge. All I'm doing now is I'm overhauling it, and that's just helping spread those seasonings and salt all over the meat. If you look carefully, you can see that that's started to exude some moisture from the meat. That's a good thing. That's what we want. We want all this brine to be on that meat, doing a good job. This will now go back into the fridge to cure. We'll take this out every day, and once it's done, we'll have this back on the bench, out the bag, and I'll take you through the next steps for making this into a wonderful copper. Right, we've taken the copper out of the fridge. It's been in there for 7 days, and we're now going to take it out the bag, give it a quick rinse, truss it so that it holds its nice circular shape, and then we'll get it into one of my dry aging bags down here. So have a look at that. It's going to go into this dry aging bag. This is a 200 by 400 dry aging bag, perfect for the copper. That will go straight in there, and we'll seal it up, and it will sit on this rack in the fridge, air drying. Okay, right, so there are a number of different things we can do to truss this. I'm going to be using butcher's string, but if you don't have any butcher's string, you can use meat net. Now I've prepped this onto a PET bottle, which I've just cut the top off, and I've put the meat net around the outside here. And then what we'll do to get this onto here, I'll show you how we do that. First things first, I'm going to be taking this out the bag, and we're going to give it a rinse. So come in nice and close, don't miss anything here. Alright, oh, first of all, that smells absolutely delicious. So let's get this over here, and we'll give this a quick rinse. That's going to come straight out the bag. Cold running water, and all we're doing is just removing the salt from the outside. We don't want to get rid of too much of that seasoning. Ooh, I'll just rinse my hands. Okay, so there's our meat. It's been rinsed. We'll get it back on the table, and we'll get it as dry as we can before we pop it in that dry aging bag. There's a few little steps to follow as well, so let's do that. Right. Okay, first things first, let's just give this a bit of a dry. So we've got everything in shot. Just make sure that you can see everything I'm doing. Come in nice and close for the knot as well. So we're going to be trussing this, and we'll try and put these knots that we're going to tie. And the reason we're tying it is so that it gives it a nice plump circular shape, so that when we slice this, once it's been air dried, you get that lovely beautiful round shape. If you didn't do that, the meat would be quite flat. So the way I'm going to do that is to truss this. I'll put one knot on here, and you can see me do that. So the way I do it is I go under, over, back under like this, and that forms like a little slip knot. And doing it nice and slowly so you can see what I'm doing, we just run that down, and we'll get it as tight as we can, nice and tight, and then we just tie this here. That locks that off, and we do it that way. Now the reason that I don't, when I do this, the reason that I don't do a running knot is because I never do a running knot for charcuterie. The reason I don't do that is because when you do a running knot on charcuterie, because you're drying charcuterie, once you've dried it, it has a tendency to shrink. And if you've got a running knot, the tightness is completely dependent on the previous knot. And as the meat shrinks, all the knots become very loose, and you just don't get the opportunity to have a nice, tight, nicely shaped piece of meat at the end of it. So that's why you'll see me do individual knots. Once you get the hang of it, it doesn't take too long. Try and keep them evenly spaced, about 25 millimeters apart, about an inch apart. There we go. So that's looking good. We'll just tighten this up. Beautiful. And I'll just put a little stop knot in the end here just to lock that off. That's it. There we go. This is like a figure of 8 knot on the bite, if you know what I mean. I'll do that knot slowly again for you so you can see what I'm doing. So, first thing we do is we get our string under the meat, roughly position it where it needs to go, bring it around the back, and then underneath, over, and back under there, through there. So this is essentially a figure of 8 knot, and you're doing it what's known as on the bite. So we've got a bite of string here, and that's why it's called on the bite. Alright, we'll carry on with the next few. So, just have a little tidy up, get rid of our offcuts, and there is the copper ready to go into the dry aging bag. So, here's our dry aging bag. Just going to fold the top back, so that when we seal that, we don't have any grease on it or anything that's going to stop that seal from happening. So if you do want to buy these dry aging bags, we do actually sell them on our website. There we go. So it's safely in the bag. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop this in the vacuum machine, and we're going to draw a vacuum. So before we do that, what we need to do is to use what we call a vac assist strip, and this just sits in the mouth of the bag, crosses the heat bar into the vacuum chamber, which is this black neoprene outline. So we'll make sure that the bag sits in that, like so, and we want this protruding out just a little bit, like that. And we're going to pop this into vacuum, and you'll watch the vacuum being drawn here. You can assist getting that air out, and that's just started to seal now, so we'll watch that. Now I'm going to leave it in the bag because I want to make sure that that seal has taken hold. I'm going to leave it in the machine rather, sorry, just until I know that that seal has taken hold. You want to make sure that that heats through that plastic there. So we'll just open that up. And there you can see you've got that heat bar going right the way across there. And that's sealed through there. So you can see now, if we go around the back, you'll also see that sealed there. So one little precaution that I do take with these bags is that I move that down. So if you come around and have a look at this really closely, I'll move it down here. Now I know I've got the vacuum, and I'll just close this up again. I'll just move it down a fraction so I have a new area to seal. And I'll just close that down, and rather than do a vacuum, I'll just click seal. Just a precautionary note here, before you open the vacuum sealer, just let the heat bar cool down so that the bag isn't melted. You'll see when I open this particular one, the bag sticks to the heat sealing bar. So just to make sure that that doesn't happen, just leave it for about 10 seconds before you actually open it. Okay, that's great. And then we'll just make sure that that comes off there, and you can see that that's sealed it again. So if I put it onto this here, you'll see that double seal going across there and across there. Now, we need to weigh this. So we need to give this a weight so that we can then work out our preferred loss. And I'm going to say that we want to lose about 30% of the weight of this. Right, we've got our scales. Let's weigh this. We'll just zero these up. So whenever we do air drying, we're not worried about how long it takes to air dry. We're concerned about the weight loss. So that's all zeroed, and we've got 993. So I'm going to write on here 3 grams. Now, because that's nearly a kilo, and to make the maths nice and easy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when this is 30% reduced in weight. So in other words, let's assume it's a kilo. So when this has lost 300 grams, so it weighs 700 grams, then I'm going to deem this as ready. If it dries out too quickly, what we'll do is we'll pop this in a regular vacuum bag to stop it drying out anymore, and that will allow it to equalise. Trouble with drying any meat is that, especially if it's quite small like this, you get a tendency for it to dry out quite quickly. And because meat dries from the outside in, sometimes the outside can case harden because it gets too dry. That can be a bit of a problem. So to avoid that, we just monitor it. If it gets too dry and it reaches our target weight, what we can do is we can pop it into a regular vacuum bag. I'll even leave it in that bag, because why not? You know, it's not going to dry out anymore if it's in a vacuum bag over the top of that. And then what will happen is the dry meat on the outside will almost naturally be rehydrated by the moisture centre. So over about a month or so, you'll get what's known as an equalisation of that meat. And when you cut through it, you won't see a dark ring around the outside. It'll be a consistent colour all the way through. So let's put our target weight on here. So we're going to be looking for 700 grams. And because, you know, I like to be quite accurate, I know that it'll be just a shade under that. So we'll pop this now onto a rack. And the way these bags work is that They're a very special membrane. If you want to know more about them, check out my 3-part series on the YouTube channel, which is all about these dry aging bags, and that tells you everything you need to know about them. I'm not going to go through that here because that information is already out there. This will dry, but it needs air on all sides. So what we do is we put it onto a rack. That means we don't have to turn it. You will also notice that after a day or so, the vacuum in this bag is lost. That's not a problem, that's completely normal and to be expected. The only reason we draw a vacuum on these bags is so that we maintain a really good contact between the bag and the meat. And as this dries out, that will bond to the meat. When I say bond, I mean just stick. Right, this will now go back into the fridge. We'll keep it on this rack so it dries nice and evenly, and we'll visit this after a couple of days, reweigh it, see where we're going. So the Coppa has now been drying for 10 days in the fridge, and I've taken it out, and you can see how that bond between the meat and the bag has formed. Now it has lost a bit of weight. It's now at 842 grams, down from 993 grams, and I make that about 15% weight loss. So that's really progressing well. This will go straight back in the fridge, and we'll bring it out a little later on to see how it's doing. Right, it's now the 16th of August, and this has been in the fridge for a total of 20 days, 10 days on from the last time, and it's now 780 grams. So that's down from 993. I make that around 22% weight loss. Another 8% to go, so this will go back in the fridge, and we'll pull it out when it's ready. Well, it only took another 4 days before the charcuterie was at its target weight of 700 grams. It was actually just a shade under, but there we go. Now, so that we don't experience case hardening, what I'm doing here is I'm putting it in a standard vacuum bag, and I'm going to seal it up, and we're going to put this back into the fridge, as I explained earlier, and allow it to dry for a month or two. Now, this can go for a couple of months, 3 months, and we'll test it and see how it's going. Once it's ready and it's all equalised, we can take it out, slice it up, and see what it tastes like. Personally, I can't wait. Right, well, hi. Here's the Coppa. It's been in the fridge for a lot longer than a couple of months. So what I think we'll do now is we'll get it on the bench, we'll have a look at it, we'll open it up, and we'll taste it. First things first, let's take it out of the vacuum bag. And if you remember, we put this dry aging bag inside a vacuum bag so that we could stop it from drying out any further and just allow it to equalise. And you can see here the difference from how that looked previously. It was a very wrinkly, dark piece of meat, and it's now softened up quite a lot, and that's perfect. I've got to say, it smells delicious. So let's get this out of the dry aging bag, and we'll see how it goes. Oh, it smells lovely. Right, we won't be using that again. So here we are. So let's take a nice section through this. So I think around about here would be perfect. And there we go. There is our Coppa. And we'll take a nice thin slice here. Now we can do this on the slicer, obviously. I'll tell you what I'll do. It's quite greasy on the outside. So I'll just give it a bit of a wipe down. Now if you remember, we used garlic with this, and that's one of the predominant aromas that I've got here. Now I do have a slicer. I don't need to get that out right now. I think just slicing a few bits here is going to be okay. Right, time for a taste, I think. Let's have a go. Very nice. It's got that lovely salty cured meat flavour. And it's nice and soft. And it doesn't have that kind of dry ring around the outside. That is absolutely delicious. You'll see that the cuts don't have that kind of characteristic ring around the outside, which is typically what you get when you dry meat. It dries from the outside naturally and it leaves it wetter in the middle than it is on the outside, and because as it dries the meat loses its moisture, obviously it darkens and you get this ring around the outside, which is indicative of a case hardening. And you can see that cross section, what I was talking about, where you get that kind of sort of salami, that rustic style salami groups of meat coming together. And that's typical of the neck region of the pig. Let me just take another couple of slices from here. I'll take off that string. Let's see how I get on with this one. Well, there you go. Coppa, a wonderful piece of Italian charcuterie. Thanks for watching. Give us a subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And if you like this video, please give us a big thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see more charcuterie curing projects, then I'll be happy to oblige. In the meantime, folks, take care and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye now.